Um, it is so often to mistake offensive hate speech as with free speech. How does one draw the line, and how do you distinguish what the difference is between both of those things?
Brad, why don't you take that first, and then I'll join in later.
Sure. Well, I'll speak again from the U.S. perspective and how that's typically thought about. So, the value of free speech includes, in this tradition, the freedom to say things that other people find offensive. Now, in the United States, there also is no restriction on what some people regard as hate speech. Some countries do have such restrictions. So in Germany, for example, there are many restrictions. You can't wear a swastika. I don't think you can buy a copy of Mein Kampf. In the United States, there are effectively no such restrictions. There may be some restriction of what is considered to be obscene speech. So often things like pornography may have some regulations or restrictions in some jurisdictions and so forth. But there's a presumption that anybody should be allowed to say anything without facing, say, legal consequence, unless, for example, they say something that is knowingly false to destroy another person's reputation, and then maybe you'll get something like a libel response. So if somebody wanted to say something, for example, that went against somebody's religion, even if somebody wanted to ridicule somebody's religion, in the United States, there would be a strong tradition that is permissible. Now, it doesn't mean that people think it's nice. You know, somebody might be a jerk and just try to go out of their way to demean or ridicule another group of people's sacred beliefs just for the fun of it. And I think that such a person would rightly be criticized by others for not contributing anything helpful, potentially, to the public discourse. And so a cliche now that you hear in online discussions is the freedom of speech is not equivalent to the freedom from consequences for speaking. So if you say something that other people find offensive, they may rightly object to what you did. But the idea is that they shouldn't object by threatening your life. They shouldn't object by removing your means of employment. They shouldn't object by intimidating you so much that you wouldn't be willing to say other sorts of things. Now, there's also, I'll just raise this, there's a role of comedians in the United States who have a kind of a special cultural protection to say things that others might very well and probably will find offensive. And part of the role of that is that if you let any idea become too sacredly held to be beyond critique, the thought is that all you have to do now to present a view that nobody can criticize is just claim to be offended if someone criticizes it. And so anybody can play that game, you know. The government can start to come up with lists of things that it thinks shouldn't be criticized, and this religious group and that religious group and some non-religious group, maybe it's a political group. Now they say, well, these ideals are sacred and you mustn't criticize them. And the point is, as soon as you start to say there's certain ideas that you can't critique, then you build this buffer of seeming protection around the idea, and then you don't have a democracy anymore. Democracy depends on the free exchange of ideas. And so the idea here is, in order for that core principle to be preserved, we're going to put no limitations on the sorts of things that a person may criticize without fearing for their life, without fearing for loss of employment, without being thrown in jail. And so free speech in the United States includes the freedom to say things that others likely will find offensive, and it includes the freedom to say things that others may regard as hateful.